I'm begging you, don't." The words tore through the wind like a fragile thread about to snap. But the farmer didn't turn back. He tightened his grip on the wooden gate, pushed it open, and stepped forward, knowing that in that single moment, he was choosing a path that would either ruin him, or change the entire territory forever. Before we go any further, if stories about courage, heart, and impossible choices move you, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. You never know which story might remind you who you really are. The territory of San Madero was a place where rules were older than memory. The hills rolled in dry waves of amber grass, broken only by scattered farmhouses and the distant silver line of the river. Generations had lived the same way: plant in spring, harvest in fall, survive the winter, and never question the council. Elias Romero was not the kind of man people expected to make history. At 42, with sun-creased skin and hands hardened by decades of work, he was quiet, steady, and known more for keeping his head down than for making speeches. His farm sat on the edge of the territory, where the soil was stubborn and the wind rarely rested. He lived with his younger sister Rosa and his 8-year-old son Mateo, whose laughter was the only sound that made the house feel full after his wife Elena passed 3 years earlier. The drought had come slowly at first. 1 weak season, then another. Wells began to cough up more dust than water. Crops failed. Livestock grew thin. The council responded the only way they knew how: control. They built a massive reservoir upriver, walling off the flow so they could ration it. The water would be distributed only to farms that pledged loyalty, paid increased taxes, and agreed to strict production quotas. Those who refused would receive nothing. "It's the only way," Councilman Herrera had declared in the square, his polished boots shining against the cracked earth. Unity ensures survival, but unity, in San Madero, meant obedience. Elias stood in that crowd the day the decree was announced. Mateo clutched his hand, confused by the tension in the air. Rosa whispered, "We can't survive without that water." Elias knew she was right. His fields were already brittle. His cattle were down to half their weight. Without irrigation, they would lose everything. A week later, he received the contract. Thick paper, red seal, sign, and the water would come. Refuse, and his farm would be marked non-compliant. Rosa cried when he hesitated. "Elias, please, don't make this harder than it already is." But the contract had more than water terms. It demanded that farmers grow only the council's selected cash crops, export grains that would bring in profit for the territory leaders. No personal gardens, no independent trading, and no sharing water with unregistered farms. That last line sat like a stone in Elias's chest. Because just beyond his land lived old Tomas and his granddaughter Lila. Their small plot wasn't officially recognized. Tomas had refused registration years ago after a dispute over land boundaries. Since then, they survived on scraps and stubbornness. If Elias signed, he would be forbidden from helping them. That night, the wind rattled the windows as Rosa pleaded across the kitchen table. "You can't save everyone. You have Mateo to think about." Mateo, small and silent, watched his father with wide brown eyes that looked too much like Elena's. "I know," Elias whispered. The next morning, he walked to the council hall. The sun was already harsh, burning through a pale sky. Farmers lined up to sign. One by one, they pressed pen to paper. When it was his turn, Herrera smiled thinly. "Romero, smart choice." Elias stared at the contract. He imagined water, running through his fields again. Mateo running between tall stalks of corn. Rosa's relief, safety. Then he imagined Tomas's empty well. Lila's thin arms. He set the pen down. "I won't sign." The hall went silent. Herrera's smile vanished. "Think carefully." "I have," Elias said, his voice steady. Water shouldn't belong to a few. By sunset, a notice was nailed to his gate: non-compliant. Water access denied. That night was when Rosa broke. "I'm begging you, don't do this," she cried, standing in the doorway as Elias gathered tools from the shed. "You're going to destroy us." But Elias wasn't walking toward destruction. He was walking toward the old riverbed. Years ago, before the reservoir, the river had split near his property. One branch dried up when the council diverted the main flow. Most believed it was beyond saving. Elias didn't. He had spent the past week studying the land, tracing slopes, digging small test holes. If he could redirect even a fraction of underground seepage, he might create a narrow channel. It wouldn't be much, but it would be enough. The work was brutal. Under a merciless sun, he dug trenches by hand. Matteo insisted on carrying small buckets of dirt. Rosa, despite her anger, brought water and bandages. Even Tomas shuffled over one afternoon, leaning on his cane. "You're a fool," Tomas muttered. "But you're a good fool." Word spread. Other non-compliant farmers began to watch from a distance. They were afraid to join him openly, but curiosity pulled them closer each day. On the 7th day, Elias struck damp soil. He froze. Carefully, he dug deeper. The earth grew cooler, darker. Then it happened. A thin, trembling trickle seeped through. Matteo gasped. Rosa covered her mouth. Tomas dropped to his knees. It wasn't a river. It wasn't even a stream. But it was water. Elias widened the trench, guiding the flow downhill toward his fields, and beyond them, toward Tomas's land. When Herrera heard, he arrived with guards. "You're diverting territory resources," he accused. Elias stood, muddy and exhausted. "It's underground seepage. It doesn't belong to the reservoir." Herrera ordered the trench filled. But something unexpected happened. Other farmers stepped forward. First 1, then 3, then 10. "We're non-compliant too," one said quietly. "If you fill his trench," another added, "you'll have to fill ours." Because overnight, inspired by Elias, they had begun digging their own channels, connecting their lands in a web of small, shared irrigation paths. It wasn't rebellion with weapons. It was rebellion with shovels. Herrera saw the numbers, saw the shifting loyalty in their eyes. Force would spark open revolt, and drought-stricken territories couldn't afford civil unrest. So he did the only thing left. He retreated. Within months, the network of trenches transformed the outskirts of San Madera. Crops grew, not the council's cash grains, but diverse food for local families. Farmers traded freely. They shared techniques. They built a cooperative system independent of the reservoir. The council still controlled the dam, but they no longer controlled the people. Elias never gave speeches. He never claimed leadership. He simply worked his land and shared his water. One evening, as the sun dipped gold across revived fields, Matteo sat beside him on the porch. "Papa," he asked, "were you scared?" Elias looked at the flowing channel glinting beyond the fence. "Yes," he said honestly. "Very." "Then why did you do it?" He thought of Rosa's tears. Tomas's pride. Lila's laughter now echoing across green rows. Alina's memory. "Because sometimes," he said softly, "doing what's right is more important than being safe." Years later, people would tell the story of the farmer who defied the council. They would exaggerate, romanticize. But those who were there knew the truth. It started with a single refusal. A single trench. A single man who chose courage over comfort. And it began with someone begging him not to. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that one brave choice can ripple through an entire community, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs the reminder that even in the driest seasons, courage can make water flow again. Because you never know, the next person to change everything might be you.